Hi, it's Steph, and today we're going on an adventure. I am joining my garden club to go to a local plant sale. Now, this is a plant sale in a nearby town that is hosted usually the first weekend of May each spring. And they have some really cool, unique plants, some rare finds, and some common things. And it is local nurseries and plants people from either locally or from surrounding towns and states that come down and join this plant sale. So let's go ahead and have an adventure and see what we can find at the plant sale. I finally arrived at the plant sale. The directions are always a little tricky to get here. It's in the center of a town, but I found a parking spot and this place is bustling. So let's go ahead and take a walk around, see what kind of fun things we can find.
When I went to review my footage, I noticed that my mic had picked up a lot of external noise, so I decided to go ahead and do a voiceover and kind of talk you through what I saw. So here they had some really beautiful varieties of Japanese maples as well as some conifers. I'm looking at a variety called Shishigashira. They also call it the lion's mane, and it has a small foliage and kind of a stacked pattern, and from afar, it almost looks like an evergreen. It's just really interesting. They also had an umbrella pine, which is really beautiful. I even found an icebreaker's Korean fir that I recently picked up at Hassan's nursery. They also had one here. And some gold leaf dicentra. Now, I was really tempted by this, and then when I went and reviewed my footage, I realized that I wanted to go back and grab it, and I didn't. So now it is on my list, and I have to get one of these at some point. I'm really loving bleeding hearts this year. They are so beautiful and have just moved up the list as one of my favorite spring perennials. This is another really unique variety of Japanese maple called Yukogumo, and it has a variegated kind of white foliage. It's really interesting. Now, some of the prices on some of these plants were quite high, and that is because some are unique and rare varieties that are sought after, so that of course will drive the price up. Here they had this really cute stand with a bunch of herbs, and I found something that I wanted to grow for a couple of years now. The Kent Beauty oregano. This is an ornamental oregano, and it does have a fragrance, but instead of being culinary, you grow it for the blooms. It has this kind of light pink sort of stacked bloom, and it looks really pretty in a hanging basket. But I'm actually going to grow mine in some kind of pot on my patio. So I was really excited to find this, and I went ahead and I picked one of these up. They also had some sage argentea. This is a really cool sage that has big, beautiful foliage and this fuzzy texture and this light blue-gray color. Reminds me very much of lamb's ear. And it can be a biennial, but I have a friend in a zone 5 that it came back for her this year. So who knows? It's just a really pretty textural plant. Then I found these topiary in these aged terracotta pots. They had a real English garden vibe to them. I'm not sure what they were growing on this form here, what kind of a greenery this was, but they also had some ivy topiaries. And ivy can be quite invasive, so the fact that they have it in a topiary is a great way to keep it contained. And here is my husband George's favorite Japanese maple. I had to take some footage for him because this one is an absolutely gorgeous full moon style maple with these really large leaves, and its spring color is stunning. And some ghost ferns. These have a really pretty kind of light green look to them. They do want a lot of shade, otherwise they will burn, but I really like the look of them. And some dawn trees. These are redwood, ogon, I believe the name of it was. And look at this beautiful chartreuse foliage. Now, I'm not too familiar with these trees, but if you grow one, let me know. Does it stay this gorgeous color year round? I think it's deciduous, I'm fairly sure, so it will lose the foliage. But when it leaves out, does it stay this way all summer? So pretty. And some variegated Solomon seal. I actually ended up picking this up because I had purchased a small start years ago at a local plant sale, and it was planted under some trees and some dry shade. I think these like a little bit of moisture, so they didn't really spread that much, and also the deer really like them, so they kept getting eaten by deer. So now I have a better plan to put them somewhere else, more protected and with more moisture. And as soon as I picked this one up, it was like a chain reaction. Everyone started to notice how pretty it was, and all 4 containers that were on the table were gone, and rightfully so, because they are so pretty. And here is some meadow rue, also known as Telectrum. Now, this variety here was quite tall. It was about 5 feet tall in height, so I didn't pick it up because I didn't have a real plan for it, which hasn't really stopped me in the past, but this day it did. But I really liked the foliage. I thought it looked kind of like columbine and had these pretty red stems. And some English ginger, which I happen to have some in my garden. I purchased a small start like this in a 4-inch container, literally just like this, several years ago at a local plant sale. I want to say it was maybe $3 or $4, and this day they were selling these for $20. And now I know why. These are pretty tough to get going. They're really slow growing and they're rare. You can't really find them that readily. So yeah, I thought those were really pretty. The English ginger. They make a really great ground cover, but they are slow growing. And some cup and saucer vine. I've wanted to try this annual for a couple of years now, and they had some available, so I picked it up. The thing with this is that it does grow quite large, very long and trailing, but it doesn't bloom until later in the season. So for me, that'll be somewhere around September here in my zone 6. And some Plectranthus. This is a new to me annual as well. I really liked the fuzzy blue-gray texture, and it's supposed to get these lavender purple spikes. So I went ahead and grabbed it to give it a try. The Sakonnet plant sale takes place in the first weekend of May each year in Little Compton, Rhode Island. So if you're local and like to collect unique and rare plants, it might be something fun to try.
I'm back home from the plant sale, so let me show you what I picked up. I'll get them out of the car and then we'll get outside and take a look. I picked up this beautiful Solomon seal. Now, this is a plant I really like, but so do the deer. And so I will have to be careful and put it in a spot that I can easily protect it. But it has really pretty variegated foliage and has a little bit of red coloring to the stem and then these sweet blooms that kind of hang on the underside of the leaves. And I just think it's really pretty. Very understated, but pretty. And I had bought one at a plant sale several years ago, and actually here it is. I had it planted in my woodland area under a tree. I think there was a lot of root competition, so these things were fighting for water. And besides that, the deer also really like them, so they kept getting chewed on. So they never really amounted to much. So I'm hoping that now, with having this much larger pot of them, that I can put them in a spot that I can keep them protected so that I can enjoy them. And the rest of the things that I picked up was I ended up grabbing one of these Kent Beauty oreganos. I've wanted to try these for a couple of years and I hadn't had a chance to. So I'm going to grow that in a terracotta pot here on my patio. Cup and saucer vine, another one that's an annual that I've never tried before. It blooms later in the season. So I'm going to grow this up and around the fence on my raised bed garden. I think that would be a really pretty use for that. And something new to me as well. This annual is called Plectranthus Silver Shield, and I really liked the foliage on this one. Had a really big silvery kind of blue foliage, and apparently it gets like a lavender purple spike bloom. And I'm going to grow this one in a container, maybe even alongside some of my dark elephant ear. That might make a really pretty combination. So I picked up 3 annuals and the perennial with the Solomon seal. While I was at the plant sale this morning, George was working on getting the water supply down to our raised bed garden area so that we can get the irrigation set up. By the end of the month, I have all of these seedlings that I've been growing that I'm going to start hardening off and getting them planted. It is now the first week of May. So yeah, probably in the next 2 weeks or so, I want to get that all planted out. So that is what he's been working on. And I've been working on adding to my plant stash, which means that I'm going to start planting some things this afternoon. I'm going to work on planting these sweet peas that I've been hardening off up against this cattle panel trellis. Now, I'm hopeful that we don't have any more frosts coming, but even if we do, I've heard that sweet peas are pretty cold tolerant, so fingers crossed. But look what I found in my gravel, some nasturtiums that germinated. I had some nasturtiums planted here in these raised beds last season, so they dropped seeds and they germinated in the gravel. Isn't that so interesting? I recognize the seeds right away, or the leaves. They're very distinct. They look like lily pads. Now these sweet peas are the flowering sweet peas. I've grown sweet peas like the snap peas that you eat before, but these I'm growing for the blooms. And this is the first time I'm growing them, and supposedly they're very fragrant. So I'm excited to see what they smell like and how they do for me. I have two varieties. I have salmon cream and heirloom. And I'm going to be really gentle about teasing this one apart because apparently they don't like their roots disturbed. I think I'm just going to plant them in a clump to leave them alone. As I've been in here planting, George has been working on getting all of the irrigation set up, and at this point he has all of the tubing run to get water to each of the beds, and he's been doing a great job. You can see here there's some tubing, and he was even able to secure it against the fence with some brackets, keeping everything nice and tidy. And that in the corner there is where we have our water source. That's also where our hose is and the timer for the irrigation. And the beds that run along the fence were a fairly simple setup because all he did was run the tubing along the fence with a tubing coming into the bed that we will later connect to drip. He secured all of the tubing with some zip ties to make everything nice and tidy. And you can see how these worked out really well because they go right up against the fence. So that was a fairly easy setup. Now for these two beds here, it was a little trickier to get the water supply into them because they're not up against the fence and there's a path here and a path there. So it took a little bit of thinking to be able to get the tubing hidden because you don't want it hanging out on top of the gravel so that you don't trip on it or walk over it and crush it. So I'm going to go ahead and insert some footage so George can explain what he did.
All right, I just finished up getting the water source to these two beds. So any area that I know there's going to be some traffic, some foot traffic, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this piece of PVC. This is just an example, but I need to cut a longer one. But it's 3/4 inch PVC, and this fits right into it. See, it slides freely. So this is 3/4 inch PVC, and then you have the 1/2 inch dig. So any area where there's going to be some foot traffic, it's only two areas in my case, but I'm going to put this down and get some landscape fabric pins. I'm going to pin this pipe down so if anybody walks on this path, there won't be any concern of it crushing my feed for my water line. And it pretty much has a T there and a 90. It goes up to there, and then T goes across into this bed and it 90s up. So usually the most difficult part of a lot of these projects is just getting things from point A to point B. So this is the most difficult bed. All the other ones are right up against the fence, so that's going to be easy to get the supply to each of those. So that's it for now. All right, everything's been backfilled, and it's like I was never there. These two beds have the supply line all set up, and all I need to do is get some clips from the hardware store so I can screw that supply line to the bottom of the fence.
The sweet peas are all planted. Now hopefully they start climbing up the trellis. And if you haven't yet fertilized your garlic, now would be a good time to go ahead and give them another feed. I gave my garlic plant tone about a month ago, and just this week I gave them some blood meal. My friend Maureen at Parsons Peonies had fertilized hers with some blood meal, and it reminded me that it was time to give them another feed. So here's your reminder. The garlic is looking really good, so this might be the first year that I might be successful with garlic. So we shall see when it's time to harvest it sometime in the beginning of July. And the chives are all budded up and getting ready to bloom as well. And the lettuce that I grew with winter sowing is also doing really well. I planted these out about a week ago, and we've had some rain, so they've really put on a good amount of size in just a week. I did fertilize them with some fish emulsion, and I have a lettuce salad bowl mix. That's this pretty green one. And then I have a mesclun sweet salad mix, which is the red leaf. but this lettuce should do well for about another month. And then once it starts to warm up, lettuce will start getting bitter because it doesn't like the hot weather. It prefers cool temperatures of spring and fall. So those are the best times to grow lettuce. And here is an update on the gomphrena grow along. Back in the end of March or so, I had invited you to grow gomphrena along with me if you planned on growing some this year. And while this is the third year that I'm growing gomphrena, it's the first year that it's giving me a bit of a fight. I had to sow seeds about 3 times now. The first time you can see it was on March 23rd. When I had put out that video, and then a few weeks later, maybe a week later or so, I sowed 8 more seeds. And then after that, I sowed even a couple more because I was having a hard time with germination. You can see I have a couple that are a little bit further ahead and a few that just started to sprout. These were the last ones that I planted. So these were first, those were second, and then these were the third batch. But all in all, I think I will end up with enough seedlings. Hopefully when it warms up and they get planted outside, they will all catch up to one another. But let me know in the comments how your gomphrena is doing. And we'll go outside and see if we have any in the winter sowing container. All right, let's take a look at the winter sown gomphrena that I started back on 3/21. All right, not great germination. I only have 2 in here, and it feels pretty moist, so I don't think moisture is the issue. It should have broken down the shell on the seed pretty well. And if we had 2 germinate, then we could have had more germinate. So I think it just wasn't a great year for me with the gomphrena germination. But the good news is that between these 2 and the few that I have inside, I will still have enough to do my front walkway border. But if you're gomphrena that you're starting is only just now starting to grow, that is normal. Gomphrena likes really warm temperatures, so it doesn't really do much until the weather starts to warm up. I've been working on getting some planting done in this pollinator bed that sits right in front of my raised bed garden. And I've planted a lot of the plants that I've been collecting and that I showed in my April plant haul. So let me show you where things ended up. In the back against the fence there, I planted the gallery yellow lupin, and it's the lupin that I had purchased over at Sylvan Nursery when I went over with my friend Maureen from Parsons Peonies. And I've grown lupin before and it can get pretty large, so I'm hoping that it's happy there and it will kind of end up filling up this space. And that light yellow with the background of the gray beds and the black fence I think will look really beautiful. And as I was planting that, I made a fun discovery. My Presidente clematis that I thought had died came back, which was so exciting. I actually placed those 3 rocks there so I would know where it was in case I had something sprout. I wouldn't mistake it for a weed and pull it. And so I went ahead and fed it with some of my Coast of Maine Quaddy blend, and I'm so excited that it's back. I'm eventually going to move it from that spot, and I'm going to plant it over by the trellis so it can grow up the trellis. It's a really beautiful purple clematis. So I'm going to leave it alone for now and try to transplant it in the fall. The mountain bluette, also known as Centaurea montana, and cornflower. Now, I've grown this variety before. It's the amethyst, which is the white with the purple center. Usually you'll see these in a purple color. And they're really pretty, almost like a very dainty spider-looking flower. I think they're really cool. Even the buds are pretty. They look like little pineapples to me. But I've grown this variety before, the amethyst, which was this white one, and it didn't return for me after winter, but I thought it was really pretty, so I'm giving it another go. I also planted the oriental poppies. I had purchased a variety called Princess Victoria Louise, which is a salmon color, so I planted one here right in front of the fence post, and I planted another one right there with the other fence post. The Tulipa tarda, which are those species tulips, the light yellow ones that I had purchased at the Home Depot. I planted one here in the front and another there. So we'll have some early spring color with those. And then I also picked up this plant recently, and this is called globe flower or trillium. And the blooms are so dainty and so pretty. They almost remind me of something like a ranunculus or even a peony. They're really roughly kind of globe shaped or rounded, really sweet looking. This is another one that I had purchased one last year. The color was more golden. This one is called either lemon zest or lemon meringue. So it is a more buttery kind of yellow, and I like it better. But the one that I bought last year didn't return. So I am trying it again, but I only buy one plant of the ones that I'm trialing. If it makes it, then great, I can pick up a couple more. But I thought that was really sweet. And I think that the yellow of these blooms will look really nice with the plant that's coming up here, which is the String Theory Amsonia. It's either String Theory or Storm Cloud. A friend had given me it, and it's starting to bud up. Has really pretty little blue star-shaped flowers. You might be wondering why I have tomato cages here in this garden, and that is because I have a plant called sea holly. And the sea holly, or Euringium, can get pretty tall, but it also can flop over and need some staking or support. So I thought that I would get those up ahead of time. Usually I catch them too late and I end up having to stake them with bamboo, and they don't hold quite so well. So we're trying the tomato cage this year and we'll see how that goes. So I have one here and one there. And I actually started these with bare root plants and they've done really well for me. And the cup and saucer vine that I just picked up, I was going to plant it originally in the middle of my fence where the clematis came back. So now that the clematis is back, I planted it right here in this corner, and I'm going to train it up the fence and over onto the arbor here. And I'm probably going to string some fishing line up the center so that it has something to climb onto with its tendrils. So that is where the cup and saucer vine ended up. I want to show you some more things that I've been working on planting, but I wanted to take a moment to appreciate the beauty of this azalea that is now in full bloom. This is a sentimental plant to me. My vovó, Natalia, and vovó is Portuguese for grandmother. She had given this to me several years ago before she passed away. She had gotten this as a Mother's Day gift from my dad. And she knew that my husband George and I had just finished building our home and we were going to have a yard and a garden. And she was a gardener and loved, I gardened with her as a kid. She grew beautiful cosmos every year that I always grow in memory of her. And so she gave me this azalea when the holiday was over and she was done enjoying it. And she said, here, plant this in your garden. And I did. And every year it comes back for me beautifully and always reminds me of her. And walking past the azalea over to this woodland bed that I have been doing a little bit of work in. So I went ahead and I planted the epimediums that we had purchased over at Sylvan. I was looking for perennials for dry shade, so I picked up 2 pink epimediums and I planted one there and one there, and I will show you the variety. And my friend Catherine from my garden club also shared with me some more of the yellow native variety. So I planted a group there, one right there, and one right there. In the middle there is that Percy Wiseman rhododendron that I planted recently. And then Catherine also shared with me some Japanese painted ferns. So I dotted those there next to the rock and back there at the base of the tree. So I think those will look really pretty as they fill in. And they have a gorgeous color, so it'll be a nice contrast against the green. And then I also reworked some of the daffodils that I had in this area. So if you recall from a couple of videos back, I had shown a beautiful clump of them right here in this corner. But I decided that I wanted to move this bleeding heart that was getting a bit covered by that lilac that I have there to this spot. So I dug up the daffodils and I placed a clump here. And then I took a couple more pieces and I added to that clump and to that clump. So they look a little sad right now. And you should definitely wait until foliage on daffodils dies all the way back and starts to brown before you cut it or do anything to them. But sometimes I get impatient and I do these things. It'll be okay. I'll just wait until they, die back. Then I'll cut the foliage off and it should be okay. And I moved this bleeding heart here, which again, I should have probably waited until it was done, but I got impatient. So the bleeding heart will now live here. And I think this will be a great spot for it because it gets a little bit more sun and I think it'll bloom better and probably fill up this space if it survives the transplant. So fingers crossed. Ajuga chocolate chip is looking really beautiful and blooming really well at the moment. And I also have some columbine in here. So just a really great mix of woodland plants. And my geranium macarizum is starting to bloom and looking lovely. So let me get in closer on the epimedium so I can show you the variety. So here, you can see it has really pretty large foliage with a little bit of pink on the edge. This one is called Epimedium rubrum galadriel. And it'll get these really pretty fairy looking flowers in shades of pink. And it's hardy in zones 4 through 9. Only gets about 15 inches in height and can spread about 24 inches. So it makes a really great ground cover option for a dry shade location. And here is the other epimedium that I planted. And this one is called Pink Elf. And it's also a really pretty, dainty pink bloom. And also about 20 inches in height. So now I have this group of bleeding hearts here and another in the opposite corner that I just transplanted. The one that I just transplanted was over here, I'll show you, and it was getting kind of blocked by a Korean lilac that should be blooming any day now, and so I decided to move it out of that spot. So the bleeding heart was right in here, and this branch was already kind of growing over it, so I dug it up from here and I moved it. Another plant that I had to move recently, just a few days ago, was the Luthico that I had purchased last fall and I had planted right here in the middle of the Geranium macrorrhizum. And what happened is the Geranium macrorrhizum grows at a much faster rate than the Luthico, and for that reason it was starting to kind of overtake it. So I decided that wasn't a great spot, so I took it and I moved it, and let me go ahead and show you where I ended up putting it. I was really hoping it would work out in this bed so that I could have that bright pop of variegated foliage, but it wasn't working out. So here's where it went, not very far. It went to this grouping here where I have a forsythia, the azalea that's currently blooming. I have a white rhododendron, and I'm sort of trying to extend this bed going backwards. It's like another woodland bed, and I planted it right here in this corner. Some of the foliage also did get some winter burn or sun scorch, which I'm surprised about because that is a pretty shady spot. But of course, they're deciduous trees, so when they lost their foliage over the winter months, there was some sun on this shrub. So hopefully it will do better in this spot and it will have some room to grow. I'm working my way through the to be planted stash, and here is another thing that I just got finished planting up. It is my bleeding heart, the white one that I picked up. And I thought this would be a really great spot for it. I didn't have any perennials planted in this bed yet. This was the one that we created using the sheet mulching method last fall, and we have a couple of Japanese maples in here as well as some conifers, some dwarf evergreens. So I planted the bleeding heart right here in the center of this blue spruce evergreen and the pine. And I think this will be a really great spot for it. I really love the white bleeding hearts. Just so pretty. The last thing on the list for today is to get this concrete basket planter planted up with some nasturtiums that I grew from seed. This concrete basket my mom had given me. She had it in her garden and she didn't want it anymore and was going to get rid of it. So I took it because I think it's really cute. So let's go ahead and get some nasturtiums planted in it. It's real messy under here with all of these rocks, and I do have to clean them out. But I'm planning on picking up a paver that I can lay here to kind of level this basket planter. So once I get the paver, I will clean this all out and set it nice and neat in this spot. But for now, I just want to get these nasturtiums growing in this basket. The variety that I'm growing is called Tip Top Alaskan Salmon, and it's a really pretty orange salmon color, but even the foliage on nasturtiums are really pretty, and this variety happens to have a variegated foliage. Today was another really productive day in the garden. I was able to get a good amount of my plant stash planted up, and that's the goal this season, is to try to keep up with planting the things that I'm bringing home so that I don't end up with a huge amount of plants waiting to find homes. So I wanted to take a moment to show you this really beautiful plant that's in bloom right now in my garden. This is the Heaven Sent Jacob's Ladder. I only planted it here last year and it is huge. I have a drift of 3 of them and they're looking really beautiful right now. They have this dark tint to the foliage. They have these lavender blue flowers that are really sweet looking, and they're about 50% in bloom. There's still lots of buds left to open up, but I wasn't sure that I'd get to a garden tour before they were out of bloom, so I wanted to be sure to share them. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos, and we'll see you soon.